What's going on, guys? Junior's Fishing Company with a musky jig video. So I thought I'd show the finished product at the beginning. I haven't really done that in a lot of videos, but I wanted to show this right away just to show you because it's a lot, and this video is going to be a lot. But this is a 14-inch beast of a jig. I've got a 1/2 ounce Jenko fishing jig hook matched with a 6/0 Orvis pike musky predator hook, and I've got loads of stuff in between those two. 14 inches, some foam in there to help it sink a little bit slower. If you want to see what this jig looks like wet, stick to the end. Alright, so the other jig videos that I've done for musky I've really liked, especially that Swimpish one. I threw that on opener and I really liked it. I've got another one, I don't know by the time this video comes out, I don't know if this black streamer one I did is gonna be on the channel yet, but I've liked that one. The only thing I've always struggled with these big jigs is getting them to sink a little bit slower. I've tied a lot of these with 1 ounce heads. This is a 1/2 ounce, but it just sinks just a little bit too fast when you're fishing it in shallower water. So I've been really kind of overly thoughtful about adding some things or using certain materials to get that to sink slower. And I also want to tie a longer bait. So this bait is going to end up being hopefully 14, closer to 15 than 13. And so I've got a couple different things I'm just going to share super quick that are going to be different, much different than the other ones I've done. And then a good chunk of this video is going to be fast forwarded because I don't want it to be an hour and 20-minute video. If you want long form content like that, drop a comment below, and I'm happy to talk my way through an entire jig like this because I'm doing it anyway. But I just feel like a lot of people wouldn't want a video that's over an hour, because this will for sure take me over an hour. So I've got 2 body tubings here, and my thought is it's going to add a little bit more of that air in the jig. So that's the first thing I'm adding. This is 1/2 inch, no, this is 1/4 inch. This is 1/2 inch plain chocolate body tubing. I just colored this red with red marker, but I doubt you'll be able to see it anyway. And I would have added maybe even an 1/8 inch one here just to taper it down, because you don't want this whole bait to be super wide like this. Maybe you do, I don't know. But I didn't have any 1/8, and I didn't want to add another 1/2, or a 1/4. So I'm hoping that'll add a little more buoyancy into it, kind of resist that 1/2 ounce weight, and especially with the trailer hook and stuff. And then I've also got I've cut some really thin strips. This is just standard foam. I really had never used foam before, so I actually had to buy this because I don't tie like hoppers and stuff. So I've got some white foam. I could end up using any color I want. I mean, I could just color these whatever, but you're not gonna be able to see them. But I'm thinking I'm gonna do some hollow ties right at the kind of middle-ish of this bait, and I'm gonna wrap some foam in between each of those ties. And then when I get up to my body tubings, I'm gonna fold them back, and I'm gonna put some foam right behind the tubings. Again, I think that's gonna add some buoyancy, and it's not gonna affect how far I'm gonna be able to cast it, because with a big musky rod, even this 1/2 ounce, you want it to be castable, but you also don't want it to sink like a rock, because I want to jig this kind of by weeds and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I'm doing just to get this to be a little more buoyant. And again, I've thought about this probably way too much, and I'm talking about it too way too much. But so what I'm going to do, so the shanks that I have, I could have gone wire, but I want this bait to be longer. And if this hook is right behind here, this is only like 6 inches or something like that. This bait would only be I mean, that's not even, that's 5.5 inches. So this back hook is at about maybe 6, right? If you put it off a little bit, you know, where it might be, that's probably 6 inches. But on a 14-inch bait, that back hook isn't even at the halfway point, and I kind of wanted it closer to that halfway point. So I actually made my own shank. This is easy to do. This is 0.035 stainless steel wire. I just cut off the looped end, and what I did was I bent it. I'll try and hold that, you can see it. I just bent a little loop so this hook is going to swim pretty freely, and this is a 6/0 Orvis Predator Musky pike hook, and so these eyes are really big. And so I bent it, and I'm gonna actually end up wrapping this wire right up to my tubing, and then I've folded this one back just to add, I always see guys do that, and apparently it makes it a little bit of a stronger hold instead of just straight. So I kept this, and I just bent it back, and I'm gonna wrap all of these down right onto there, and you can see that adds some length to this back hook, which will probably go, I think it's almost 7 inches back. So I want it at that halfway point. I don't know why halfway in my head is a good number. It's not like I've missed a bunch of fish on a shorter hook, but you know, that's just the number I had in my head is half. So now I'm gonna have a ton of room right here, and I don't want to really tie a ton on there. So what I'm going to do is I've got some chocolate filler flash that I'm going to put, this is just gray, it doesn't have a size. I'm just going to wrap some of this on that shank just to, so it isn't, you know, I don't want a thin point in my jig. So I'm just going to add that, maybe it'll help a little bit, who knows. For the tail of this, I've got whiting, schlappen, standard. This is the 10 to 14 inch. I got these at Musky. If you hit their website at the right time, you can pick a bunch of different colors. Stuff is kind of expensive, but it lasts a long time. I think these are like 20 bucks. This is just gray and blue. For bucktail, I've got mostly white, but I've got a little bit to match those feathers. I've got 2 different colors of gray, kind of like a light gray, and this, I don't know, I can't remember what name this gray is, and then just some standard light blue or whatever you'd want to call it. And then, yeah, just a ton of white, but I mixed some of that gray in there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do deer hair standard tied on this. I'm going to do some hollow ties here, and then when I get right between my 2 body tubings, I've got some really high quality bucktail, like 6-inch beautiful fibers, and I'm going to do a big chunk of that because that's just going to kind of sit really far back. It's just going to add more body to it. And then up here by my head, I've just got, I blended some Nightmare Musky Fool, or Nightmare Musky Flies, Musky Fool, tightened up. This is UV white and just gray. So I blended these 2 together, and that's gonna be my head. So again, and I'll add some flash in, but again, I've been talking like 8 minutes. So I'm gonna get to tying. So I'm gonna get this hook off, or the jig out. Just put it right there. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this out of the shank just so I don't have to mess with it too much. And when I'm done tying on it, I'll put that back on. So the first thing I'm gonna do, so I just put a little rattle here, glued it down. This wire that's sticking back here, I've got like a little mark on it too. I just wanna be conscious of where I wanna wrap these feathers to, because it's always, I always get caught up in the moment of just tying, and you forget that there's gonna be a jig and a big gap here. So if I'm adding the feathers here, to 14 inches back here, then the bait's gonna be like 19 inches. So I put that there so that when I'm in the middle of tying and I kind of just get in the zone, I know don't pass here, don't come short here, and so that's just me being crazy. In the past, when I've used this schlappen or saddle, the tail just always seems really, really thin, and that's okay because you want that movement. The less you have, the more movement there's probably gonna be. But I want as much bulk as far back as I can get it, and then I can just have like 6 inches of just feather. And so I'm gonna add just a white stack of bucktail first, and then I'm gonna add my schlappen, and then I'm gonna put one more big bundle of gray and blue right at the eye of my hook. But the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add some flash in for underneath the bait, just to help it kind of show through. I'm going to restack some of these. So I'm going to put this, and it's going to go pretty much back to where my feathers go. Just want to make sure that you want to make sure and taper these out. So I'll have about an inch or two left of room just for the feathers. Not that it's really super gonna matter a ton, but I wanted a little flash in this tail that didn't kind of, that wasn't on the outside of this whole bait. So I want some of it to run just under it. So when all those things are moving, again, I'm overthinking this by about 1.5 miles, but I've just had some baits that I really liked, but there's just been a couple little tweaks I've wanted to make, and so you kind of end up thinking about it, and you want your, it's mostly about confidence. If you have a bait that you have confidence in, that is more important than probably actually having a good bait. So I'll just keep that on there with my bait guard, and then I got my old scissors that I'm going to trim this with because I don't want my good scissors getting all gluey. So then I'll come up here, right, and again I've marked some of these spots. I'm going to put a really good chunk of bucktail down. This is at least a pencil, maybe even closer to 2 almost. But I've almost yet to tie a big musky bait that I thought was too much. So it's really hard to tie a bait and say, well, if I would have just used less materials, maybe if you're tying a size 16, Prince nymph or something, yeah, you might want to say, well, I probably used too much materials. But on a big musky bait like this, so I'm going to get that pushed all the way around, and it doesn't look like I'll have too much to worry about with that rattle. Kind of get it pushed on the sides more to keep it off that rattle, and then I'm just going to ream down on this, cord at my thread. And there's not going to be any flare or anything in this. This was literally from the farthest tip. It wasn't even on the sides. It was literally the top part of the tail that I grabbed this from. And that's going to be a big thread bump. But that's alright, because I'll just come down after I trim this. So I'm going to put this schlappen down, and I'm going to kind of put my gray down first. I've probably got 15 to 17 feathers, so kind of a lot. Again, I'm having a hard time adding too much to these baits. So eventually I'm going to make a bait and say, gosh, that looks like a barrel in the water. But until then, I'm just going to keep, and these feathers are a lot thicker than, say, like a saddle hackle. And so on some saddle hackle tails, I've added 30 plus feathers, but they're so thin, and these are just a little bit thicker, but the stems are still really thin, so they still move really well. So I'm gonna fast forward through this. But what I'm gonna do, I'll probably do half a dozen gray, couple blue, half a dozen gray, and then the rest are gonna be blue. All right, whew. So I've got the feathers, 2 stacks of bucktail, and I just added a little bit of flash at the end. I'm not worried about covering up this eye a ton. I mean, I've still got almost the whole thing is, you can still get there. So, because I just need enough room to stick this shank in there. So I had like 3 feathers left, and I thought, that's too much, that's too much, that's too much. But again, that's what I always think. So this would actually be a pretty cool streamer as is. But we've got a long way to go. I'm gonna get this shank on, and I'll get the jig hook in the vise, and we'll keep going. Okay, I've got that shank on there, and I've just did a couple wraps because it was all, I'm trying to get it all squared away and on there. So I just wanted to make sure that my hooks are gonna both ride down, or in this case, they'll ride up when I'm actually fishing it. I just wanna make sure that the twisted part at this back is riding with my bait, parallel with my bait. I don't want it twisted or anything like that. So I'm gonna put some glue down. I'm gonna get this wrapped. You can see that there's a gap right here, and what I'm gonna do is, when I take this back off, I'm gonna put this part right here in my vise, and I'm gonna just do a bunch of wraps with some super glue here just to close that up, and then I'll do my chocolate wraps there. It's gonna be really weird. Typically, like if you were tying a fly and the hook was in the back with this shank, you could just put the shank in and tie it. But unfortunately, I'm putting this shank onto something else, and so I didn't want to wrap a bunch of stuff here and then have to try and wrap this, or maybe I should have done that. I could have maybe gone either way, but I went this way with putting this on first. It's gonna be super annoying to wrap stuff here with a jig hanging down, but that's just how I decided to do it. So again, I'm gonna get this glued in and solid, and then we'll come back here. Alright, so I've got my shank in the vise. I just did a bunch of wraps, just of thread, just to start off and save some time on the video. But what I'm going to do, I've got this chocolate filler flash, and I'm just going to do touching wraps all the way down. Again, just because this is a lot of empty space, and I don't want that much, because I almost know for certain that it would be pretty shallow there, and I don't want a low point in the middle of my bait. And I'm going to go up pretty much as far as I can here, and I'm just going to do wraps all the way up until I get to my hook. Alright, I wish that this, maybe I should have used large chenille. It's going to be, I think there might be a little thin spot right there, but I'm going to put down a big layer of bucktail, just straight tie. I'm going to put it, and it's going to go to about right here anyway, and then I'm going to do 4 hollow ties up to my first tubing, and then I can kind of get up here. But what I'm thinking is I'm going to have some room right here, so I'm going to put down my first little bit of foam. So I'm going to do foam, straight tie, 4 hollow ties, and then we're going to get back up there. But so far, I kind of like it. I'm going to do those things, and we'll see you on the other side. Alright, so that hollow tying is just a nightmare when you've got all this stuff that you're trying to push back. But anyway, I'm going to put a little bit more foam. I've got, I don't know, 1, 2, 4 or 5 little stacks of foam in here. I honestly don't know if it's going to do anything or not, or if this thing's going to float and be useless. But I kind of measured out how much foam I use, so I know on the next one to either go lighter or to use more. I'm going to push this up right against my tubing. And then I've got just a little bit of deer hair that I'm going to put down. I'm just going to put a couple wraps here because I don't want, kind of going to try and pile it up. I just cut this so thin that you can't really put tons of pressure on it, because I've broken a couple, and that's just annoying as well. And then I've just been putting a little bit of glue. Again, I've never used a ton of this foam, so I don't know how durable it's going to be. I think if I put some glue on it like I am, and it's just going to stick together because it's just those thin little strips, but that glue, I'm hoping it's just going to mash it all down and just kind of be one giant thing. So I'm just going to put, I'm not even going to waste my time trying to hollow tie between these. It's just, to me it's just not going to be worth it. So I got some bucktail that from the bottom of the tail, and so I'm hoping I can just get some flare out of this. Now I know originally I had the stack right there ready to hollow tie it, but it's not gonna bode well, and that kind of, I hope it doesn't negate everything I've done up to this point in terms of hollow tying. But again, I just don't see it being super worth it to hollow tie here. Alright, for the head, again I'm just using Titan Dub, basically gray and white. That's primarily what this whole bait has been, with just a little bit of blue, and there's actually kind of like a purplish blue crinkle flash or whatever it's called in there. So again, I'm adding a little bit of blue in there, just not a ton, because I didn't want this bait to turn out too blue. And this Titan Dub is super long, and I'm going to tie most of it towards my head, so that, you know, 70-30 maybe. Let's see. I want most of it on this side. You can't even see it. I should have zoomed out on my camera. But I'm going to get that right on top. I'm going to get my thread as far up as I can. And I'm going to do just a loose wrap and just get that down and cinch it really good. And then I can kind of fold it out. kind of veil it over. So I'm gonna get this second stack. These are both the same color, so it really doesn't matter if they're super evenly spun around, because they're the exact same. If you were doing like a chartreuse bottom and a black top or something, you'd have to really be careful about splitting these evenly. But again, these are the exact same. I just want to get these cinched down really well, and then I want more directly on the top than the sides, because if anything, that red will kind of show through. And kind of get this one pushed back, feed it through, rotate, and get this one up. And I'll pull both of these back and get a couple really good thread wraps down here just to kind of cinch it in. You can, I could probably do 100 wraps here because this head is so big, but I really am not too concerned about it. I'm going to get this combed out. Alright, so I added a little bit more to one of the sides because there was a bunch of red showing, because I think when this gets wet, it's going to suck onto that red, and I think that red might end up showing. So I'm going to get this just tied off. Some safe wraps. I could almost whip finish this, but I'm just going to do a couple half hitches. Then I'll just put just a dab of glue on this thread just to make sure that it's not going to go anywhere. And then I'm going to add some eyes. Maybe I'll just do head cement. So I'm going to put some head cement on here, and then I've got these 15mm eyes. Again, this bait has one intention, and that is to be too big. So why not end with the biggest eyes that they sell, at least that I've been able to. 15mm eyes are massive, and these are just living eyes, so 5/8 of an inch. So these are just the living eyes ice, and these are about as big as my eyes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a little lighter, and I'm going to singe off some of this fluff that's on here. Just to kind of flatten it out a little bit. And I'm going to push really hard on that tubing with these eyes. These eyes are so big that I'm going to put a ton of glue on here. These eyes are so big that I'm hoping I can just be pretty rough with this. Go about halfway down. Halfway. These things cover half of the thing. Got some glue that I'll clean up. So just about halfway, and you can see in the camera that they're kind of slanted because of that tubing, but in the water you're not really going to be able to tell. So I'm going to do the other side. Bunch of glue. Push that back. Go about halfway. Give it a good push. That's pretty good. And I'm going to push both of these a ton. But again, that tubing isn't going to move. It's not going to flex in just because I'm pushing on it. It's gonna rebounce back out. So these eyes are gonna be a little curved. All right, a little over 14 inches, close to 15. Blue, gray, white, big old musky streamer, 1/2 ounce Jenko fishing hook, 6/0 Orvis musky pike hook. This tail hopefully doesn't shrink down too much in the water. I added as many feathers as I thought that were gonna do it. It looks like it might hold up pretty well, but we'll see when it hits the water, right? Appreciate it if you've made it this far. Like and subscribe, leave a comment below. Hopefully I can get this thing on the water pretty soon and see if the fish like it as much as I do. See you in the next one.